Hey BookTube, and welcome to my first video for the History Considered channel. In this video I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Alex, and I have recently discovered the BookTube community, and it's been pretty amazing. I've had experience with other communities on the internet. I'll get into that a little bit later. But the BookTube community, I think, is unique. It's so kind of close-knit, yet diffuse at the same time. Everybody's got their own interests, but there are things that pull people together, and I think the way that people share ideas and the books that they read is really, really wonderful. I've been entranced by this community. I've just been watching video after video lately, and I decided I'd take the plunge myself and try to create my own channel as well. So the vehicle I'll use to introduce myself is the BookTube Newbie tag, which I think was originally created by Brenda C, and I'll link to her video about this in the description for my video. So there's a series of questions to get to know me, so I will start going through those questions. So the first one is, when did you start? Why did you start this channel? Well, I've been blogging about the books I've been reading since 2009. My blog, historyjournal.org, is online. I've updated it kind of sporadically throughout those years based on what I've been reading and thinking about. And I've always been looking for a way to break through that medium. I wanted to have more of a connection with others about what I've been reading, because even though I've been blogging and there are some people that leave me comments, there wasn't really a community that I encountered or that I was able to be a part of. So I've been doing that kind of as a log of my reading, which isn't very prolific. And I've also tried podcasting a little bit. It's been going really horribly. I wouldn't recommend listening to those. I think the BookTube community, the YouTube video avenue, is a better fit for me, because I've been involved in one of the online communities I've been involved in is flight simulation. And that's a big hobby of mine. It has been since 2012, and that's kind of the first time I became a part of an online community, and it's a really good community. Mostly there are a lot of people on YouTube, but it's mostly centered around Twitch is where I became part of that community. And I do have a YouTube and a Twitch channel, which I guess I can link to below for my flight sim stuff, but you guys, I'm sure, are more interested in the bookish aspects of what I do. So again, I was really excited to discover the BookTube community, and when I get a hobby and I kind of switch from one hobby to another, I kind of get consumed by it. I use up a lot of my free time pursuing that hobby, whether it's hockey, it's been hockey lately, or model building, or flight simulation, or various amount of other hobbies. But I think discovering BookTube has I've been looking for like one hobby to really stay with, and I've had that experience with reading books and writing about them and thinking about them. And I think this will be a good community for me to really focus in on one hobby and pursue that. So that's why I decided to start the channel. What are some fun and unique things you can bring to BookTube is the next question. Well, I think a lot of booktubers read fiction, and there are a lot of booktubers that read nonfiction, and both fiction and nonfiction. A lot of really good booktubers that are well read, a lot more well read than I am. And I think what can make my channel unique is I want to focus on history books, in particular new works of history that have come out by scholars and popular history writers like journalists, and I want to focus on that, on historical secondary sources, biographies, nonfiction in general about current events, things like that. And my main kind of thread that I like to follow is the history of ideas and how ideas change and how attitudes change throughout history, why people tend to think at a certain time one way, and then events happen and they begin to see things in a different way. And that intersection between sometimes traumatic, sometimes really big events in history, and how, like a war, for instance, and how that affects the mentality of people as evidenced through literature, art, culture, things like that. That is really the kind of reading that I really like to do, and I'm going to seek out those authors that can follow those threads. So I want my channel to be kind of an intersection of scholarly and popular history. I feel like those two worlds are kind of divided right now, and I'm overgeneralizing, of course, but I think there's room for a BookTube channel that tries to look at both scholarly works of history and popular works of history, and kind of see where the current ideas about the past are right now. I should mention that I'm not a historian myself. I did study history in college. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I studied history there. And I don't consider myself a scholar. I have a bachelor degree, so I'm not a historian, but I'm just a lover of history, a lover of ideas, if I can say that. And I think that's what I can bring to BookTube. So what am I most excited about for this channel? I think the fantastic community that I've discovered. I've been lurking a lot lately, haven't really posted a lot of comments, but I really have been reading a lot of comments and watching a lot of videos, picking up on best practices and things like that. So I'm really excited about becoming a part of the community. I also want to read more. I'm not a prolific reader at all. I'm a fairly slow reader, and I get mostly, I'm not too slow when I'm reading, but I get distracted easily. And as I've recently discovered by putting a lot of my books that I've read and picked up on Goodreads, I've discovered that I do not finish a lot of books, mostly because they lose my interest, or my interest changes really rapidly. So I'm looking forward to more consistency in my reading. And I also want to find out ways to talk about history. I think it's kind of difficult for people, myself included, to discuss history. It can come off as kind of like a snobbish exercise, or like just a criticism of art, like movies that don't exactly tack exactly to the historical record. I feel like there's avenues of talking about history that exist that a lot of people aren't comfortable with if they don't like history. So I want to explore ways to talk about the past and find out new possibilities for dialogue, I guess, if I can be so bold. Why do I love reading is the next question. Again, I am really interested in this idea of the movement of the mind, I believe is a term by historian Chester Starr, if I'm not mistaken. The movement of the mind through history, so how attitudes have changed, etc. And that is what I love about reading, is discovering that. I actually get somewhat of a high when I have an idea that's been challenged by something new that I've read or talked with somebody in, and the way that I was seeing something before, my paradigm gets shifted. I really, really love that process. So that's what I'm looking forward to in reading. Also, there's the element of escapism. I've always had that, and driving my reading, you can kind of get into another world, kind of stop thinking about your everyday problems and focus on this new world that you're discovering. In my case, it's an old world. It's something that's happened in the past, but It's a comforting feeling. It's very imaginative, and I like that process. And it's also a hobby. Like, reading is a hobby that I don't regret doing. I've done a lot of hobbies, like flight simulation. I don't necessarily regret doing it, but I have this, a lot of times when I'm doing my other hobbies, I have this feeling in the back of my mind that I could be spending my time doing something better. And when I discover ideas, when I read books that are insightful, I don't have that feeling. Next question is, what book or series got you into reading? Well, there were 3 books. I was thinking about this question, and it actually made me reflect a little bit about my childhood, which I don't have a great memory for somebody that's really interested in history. But I started thinking about some of the books that I read as a child, and one of them was The Giver by Lewis Lowry. And I was part of this group when I was like in 3rd or 4th, I think 4th grade, where they segmented out a bunch of students that had, I guess, an aptitude for reading literature, and we had like our own little book club in this room without any windows. And I remember reading The Giver, which could explain kind of my proclivities towards really liking Plato later on, this whole kind of esotericism and I guess philosopher kings or whatnot. But anyways, I think that is one of the first memories that I have of really being involved in reading. And then also I remember reading A Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson when I was in 4th grade, and we were supposed to write a review or some kind of reflection on the book, and my teacher said that what I wrote had almost brought her to tears. It was so nice. I don't know how, like an 11-year-old or whatever, what I had to write to say that, but I do have that memory, and I remember nothing of the book. The book left no lasting impression on me. Maybe I should reread it. But that was another memory that I had of about the 4th grade. And then also, I read this book called The Last Mission by Harry Mazer. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. But that was about B-17 bombers during World War II. And I read that on my own, unlike the other 2 that I mentioned. I read this one on my own around the same time, and I was kind of, when I was making my transition into more mature reading, however you want to call it. And it was a book about, it was a fictional novel, but based, I think, on the author's personal experiences in, I think he was a member of a bomber crew during World War II. So he was writing a novel about that, and I remember feeling very grown up reading something like this. It had swear words, even though this novel for some reason was sold at one of our school book sales. So I remember feeling very grown up around the 4th grade when I was reading it. Next question is, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? I kind of have a boring answer. I would probably want to find out more about best practices and like how best to do different kinds of videos on BookTube. I've been watching a lot of those kinds of videos, and I especially been seeking them out. And I just kind of feel a little bit of nervousness making this channel and making these videos, because I don't want to make a wrong step. I don't want to do something that is frowned upon in the community, or peg myself into a way of doing reviews that's not that great. Also, I'm interested in people's routines for reading, and this video is getting to be so long. It's going to be a long one, but I feel like that might be a feature of my channel. My videos may be a little bit longer than is the norm, unfortunately. But anyways, I'm interested in routines for reading and how people read fast, the ones that do, which is pretty much everybody else on BookTube. I tend to be a slower reader, and I'm always kind of trying to push myself to read more carefully and faster. I'm going to skip over this part that I wanted to talk about for the sake of brevity and move on to the next question. What challenges do you think starting a BookTube channel will be the hardest to overcome? I think reading with consistency and concentration, like I've mentioned, would be a challenge for me. And then also finding my place in the community. I really like the community, and I hope there's a place for me here. When did I start reading? I was born in Belarus, and I first started reading in Russian. My parents would read to me. I remember reading stories about a Swedish boy that became really small and went on adventures with geese. I'm sure there's an English title. There's an English name for that book. I don't remember the Russian name. It's been translated into English too. I remember encountering it, but I forget the name. I remember reading other stories about armies of wooden soldiers, and this guy, like a dictator-like person that tried to create an army of these wooden soldiers and rule certain principalities or whatever. And yeah, I remember reading stories like that when I was younger, and they were of course in Russian. And I can still read Russian, but very slowly, and I can speak Russian and write Russian very poorly. Where do I read is the next question. I read mostly in my living room. I do really like to read in cafes. The kind of lighting, the mood has to be right. Libraries are a favorite of mine. I can really concentrate on libraries, but mostly I did that for school when I was in university. And I have trouble reading outside. I feel like I need to have a sense of enclosure that has to kind of contain my literary world that I'm a part of at that particular moment. I don't know why, but kind of the open spaces outdoors make it hard for me to focus on reading. What kind of books do you like to read? I like to read history books, biographies, and fiction is something that I want to get into more. A lot of people read very wide selection of books on BookTube, so that's been inspiring to me. My channel is going to focus on history, but I might slowly start to branch out first into historical fiction and then literature. We'll see how it goes. But I think the core of my channel will be new works of historical scholarship. So those are my questions for the BookTube Newbie tag. And I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope I can become a part of this community. I've already got an idea to do a book review. I think on my channel I'm going to have a lot of reviews. This will be the first one that I do, I think. I've already finished it. And if you can, please comment, like, and subscribe and support me, especially as I'm starting out. I currently have 0 subscribers. So any little bit helps. And I hope to see you guys in future videos. Thanks, BookTube.